Today, we are looking at a moment from The Office that I'm sure we've all thought about at one time or another, and that's the chili scene. Specifically, we've got an article here with some pretty cool behind-the-scenes facts about the making of the scene, and let me tell you, it was almost a much bigger disaster than what ended up on screen.
Wow, I mean, that's really saying something. Kevin's chili is practically a character all on its own in that episode.
It really is, and I don't think anyone can forget that slow-motion shot of the chili slowly oozing across the carpet. I mean, it's comedy gold, but it turns out that it was a nightmare to film. According to this article, they only had 3 carpets to work with for all the takes.
3 carpets? For all that chili, you really have to trust your actors then. And trust the chili. Can you imagine the pressure on Brian Baumgartner knowing that one wrong move and they have to reset the whole scene?
I can't even imagine. It's like the pressure of the situation really mirrors Kevin's own anxieties in the episode. He's so proud of that chili, so determined to impress everyone, and then, boom, disaster.
You know, it really taps into something I think we all fear. That fear of failing in front of everyone, messing up when you're trying your hardest, and then having to scramble to fix it before anyone notices.
Yeah, and it's all happening in slow motion.
Like a car crash you just can't look away from.
You know, you mentioned the slow motion, but we have to talk about the sound design too. That squelching sound as the chili spreads across the floor. Chef's kiss.
All about the details. Something The Office always did so well. You know, speaking of details, I thought it was interesting that in this article, Baumgartner said that fans who found the scene funny are psychopaths.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I think it makes you think about the line between humor and empathy. It's funny on the surface, but it's also kind of sad. Kevin's pride just turning into complete despair is kind of heartbreaking.
It's like, even in the most absurd moments, there's that kernel of real human vulnerability. I mean, we've all felt like Kevin standing there covered in metaphorical chili, just wanting to disappear.
You know what's even crazier than the final version of the scene, though?
What's that?
The original script.
Oh,
It was even more chaotic. The author of The Office, The Untold Story, shared it online a few years ago, and it turns out that in the original script, Kevin goes into full panic mode after he spills the chili, like trying to scoop it back into the pot with anything he can find, a clipboard, his bare hands.
Oh my God, I can just picture him trying to wipe it up with his tie,
Yeah.
muttering to himself, it's fine, everything's fine. Classic Kevin.
Exactly. But it gets even better. The reactions from the other characters are even more over top in this version. Andy comes in and asks, "What's that smell?" And Erin, bless her heart, tries to cover for Kevin by saying the smell was already there when she got in.
Oh, Aaron.
And of course, Jim, always the observant one, chimes in with, "It smells like Kevin's favorite chili." I can just hear John Krasinski's delivery.
Oh, it's perfect. The tension keeps building.
But wait, there's more.
More.
In this alternate chili verse, the scene ends with Kevin slipping in the kitchen and ends up completely covered in his own chili.
Wait, so instead of just the carpet, Kevin himself is the casualty. I don't know if that's funnier. The slow spread across the carpet is so iconic, so understated. Maybe it would have lost some of its comedic impact if Kevin was drenched in it too.
You know, that's a good point. Maybe the writers realized that a chili-covered Kevin would have just been too absurd, and it would have taken away from the awkwardness of the situation. It's kind of like Michael Scott and his "I know exactly what to do" energy. Kevin trying to fix the spill is just like Michael's misguided solutions. It just makes the chaos worse.
That's a really interesting comparison. It really highlights that tendency we see in both of them, towards well-intentioned but ultimately disastrous actions.
It really makes you wonder how that scene changed from the original concept to the masterpiece we ended up with.
Yeah, what a journey.
Speaking of masterpieces, let's take a step back for a second and talk about the broader impact of The Office on TV comedy as a whole.
Now there's a conversation worth having. The Office didn't just make us laugh. It completely changed what a sitcom could be. From the mockumentary style to the way it uses cringe humor. It broke the mold. But maybe most importantly, it found a way to make us laugh and care about these characters, even when they were at their most awkward.
And speaking of awkward, let's take a quick break to gather our thoughts. And when we come back, we'll talk about the lasting legacy of The Office and why it still resonates with audiences today.
You know, it really is amazing how one scene like the chili disaster can just become this huge part of pop culture.
Yeah.
I think it says a lot about how good the show is, but also something a bit deeper.
It's definitely more than just a funny scene. It really captures everything the show's about and how well it connects with people.
Exactly. You've got that whole office hierarchy thing going on. Michael's the clueless boss, Andy's trying to be the authority figure, and Jim is just watching the chaos unfold.
Yeah, and then you've got Kevin right in the middle, the everyday worker, just trying to do their best, even if it blows up in their face. I think that's why so many people love that scene. We've all been there, drowning in chaos. And all you can do is just laugh.
You know, it's true. Even when everything's going wrong, there's always something to laugh about.
Mm.
And sometimes that humor is what gets us through. But I also think it's about more than that. The chili scene. Like a lot of the best moments in The Office makes us think about how awkward it is to be human and how vulnerable we are. It's messy, but it's real.
It's so real. And that honesty, that willingness to embrace the cringe, it's a big part of what makes The Office different from other sitcoms. It doesn't shy away from uncomfortable moments. It shows us how flawed all the characters are, but we still love them because we see ourselves in them.
That's such a key insight. The writers had to walk this fine line with all these characters. They're funny because they're clueless and make mistakes and say the wrong things, but they're never actually mean. It's a hard balance to strike, and The Office does it so well.
They really do. All these characters are flawed and lovable and hilarious all at the same time. It's like a family sitcom, but at work.
And speaking of family, I think that sense of community is a big reason why people love this show, the ensemble cast. The way everyone's quirks and personalities work off each other. It creates this chaotic energy. But it's heartwarming at the same time.
It goes beyond the characters, too. There's a whole community around the show, fans getting together online, sharing memes, conventions. It's bigger than just a TV show.
It shows the power of storytelling. When it's done right, a story can make people feel like they belong. It can make you see the world differently. And The Office did all that, even with its boring setting and weird characters.
It really captured people's imaginations. And even though the show ended years ago, it still feels like we're discovering new things about it, like those behind-the-scenes stories, like the original script for the chili scene. It gives us a whole new perspective on how the show was made.
It's like an archaeological dig, uncovering all these layers of meaning. It makes you appreciate the show even more. It reminds us that even something as effortless as a comedy takes so much work and collaboration.
So what would you say is the most important takeaway from the success of The Office? What can we learn from its mix of humor and heart?
Well, one of the most important things, I think, is that you can find humor anywhere. Even the mundane stuff, awkward moments, cringy stuff. It can all be funny if you have the right perspective. But it's not just about being funny. It's about using humor to explore deeper truths about ourselves and the world.
So it's about finding the balance between laughter and meaning, between lightheartedness and human connection.
That's it. The Office reminds us that even when things are ordinary, even in work and relationships, there's still beauty and laughter and stories to tell. It wants us to embrace the awkward stuff and the weird stuff and find connections in unexpected places.
I love that. Finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, the heart in the humor, realizing that even in a workplace with all its hierarchies and competition, there can still be real human connections.
That's something we all need. That feeling of belonging. I think it's another reason why people still love The Office. It reminds us that we're not alone in feeling awkward or struggling or even succeeding. It celebrates what it means to be human, all the messy and complicated parts.
Speaking of messy and complicated, let's shift gears a little bit. We've been focusing on how funny The Office is, but there are some criticisms of the show worth talking about.
Ah, yes. No work of art is perfect. Even something as popular as The Office has its critics.
And some of them bring up valid points about how some of the characters and situations are portrayed. So let's dive into that a bit and see what we can learn from these other perspectives. So we've talked about how great The Office is and its impact on comedy and how it brings people together. But like you said, no show is perfect. What kind of criticisms do people have about The Office?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that the humor, especially in the later seasons, can be kind of offensive. Some people say that some of the characters, like Michael Scott, do things that would never be okay in a real workplace.
That's true. Michael's always pushing the boundaries of what's appropriate. And while the show does show that he has flaws, some viewers think he doesn't really face consequences for his actions.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if the show is making fun of bad workplace behavior, or if it's actually normalizing it. Some people say that because Michael's a lovable goofball, it downplays how much damage people in power can do when they abuse their authority.
It's a tough question. Because it's a comedy, we're not supposed to take it literally. But at the same time, the characters and the setting feel so real. So it makes sense that people would wonder what message the show is sending.
I think it's a good conversation to have. It's important to look at art critically and to understand that even the things we love can have problems. It doesn't mean we have to stop watching, but it does mean being aware of what the show is saying and having those conversations about what's okay and what's not.
It's a good point. The Office is a product of its time. Like anything, it reflects the world it was made in. So as we learn more about things like workplace dynamics and social issues, it's natural to go back and look at these shows with a more critical eye.
I agree. That's part of what makes art so interesting. It's not static. We're always reinterpreting it through the lens of our current culture. And those new interpretations can lead to important conversations and help us understand ourselves and the world better.
It's like the show is a time capsule, showing us what a specific time in history was like, with all its good and bad parts. And when we watch it today, we can see how far we've come and how much further we still need to go.
And that shows just how powerful stories can be. A good story can hold up a mirror to society and make us think about what we value and believe and how we act. And even a comedy like The Office can make us think about important social issues and how we treat each other.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into The Office, I think we've come to a pretty interesting conclusion. It's a show that's funny and makes you think. It's heartwarming and problematic at the same time. And people are still debating and discussing it years after it ended.
It's a good reminder that even the things we love can challenge us and make us uncomfortable, and maybe make us think more critically about the world. And maybe that's the best thing about The Office. It starts conversations and challenges what we think is normal, and reminds us that even in boring places, there's always something to learn and laugh about and talk about.